a central question in urban and real estate economics of the impact of the supply of credit on house prices. One of the things that we wanted to try to explain, or at least understand, is why there are large within city shifts in the distribution of house prices. We develop a general equilibrium model of location choice where people make a trade-off between the amenity and the price. We can predict the shifts in the distribution of prices in response to a shift in the supply of credit. We match key moments of the distribution of the price changes. We also show that there is an increase in Asian isolation, Black isolation, and Hispanic isolation. We start with a fairly standard location choice model. The probability of getting approved for a mortgage plays a big role just because in the data set we observe that we have a denial rate that is substantial, and that affects the choice set of households. We have an equilibrium we can write as a vector of prices and a vector of demographics. Each equilibrium is locally unique, so we're going to be able to change the lending standards locally around the equilibrium to see how the price distribution changes around that particular equilibrium. We use an instrument that was first used in a paper by Lusk that is looking at the liquidity of the national banks, that is arguably independent of the local conditions, and the shifts in the liquidity of the national bank sort of flow to the local neighborhood and explain the credit conditions at the local level. We get impacts of the LTI ratio on the probability of approval. That is, an increase in the LTI ratio by 1 lowers the probability of approval by 13 percentage points. The fact that people are constrained in their choice set, in their choice of neighborhood, means that their willingness to pay for some of the amenities may be much greater than using traditional models that don't take into account the borrowing constraints. So the idea here is that even if the city stays at equilibrium, there are shifts in the demand of particular ethnic and racial and income groups that mean that the city can stay at equilibrium. There's going to be inflows and outflows.
They start the paper talking about the modeling, and they step through that very efficiently, and then they go through this big bit of work to get the parameters for this. Then if they're happy, then they do the work at the end. So there's a lot to do. I actually think the story's right, okay? So I think creditability matters quite a bit. I think the value they add in the paper is doing this. You're looking at diversity and segregation and location choice based on racial and social ethnic variables, is that the API you use for a system as a whole varies a lot. 92% of the employment in San Jose is not in San Jose or San Francisco. It's actually spread out throughout the region. So using the CBD to capture job access or shopping access doesn't make tons of sense. And you've written this equilibrium model, right? And you've proved equilibrium. I don't know what to think about equilibrium is in 2006. My point is, I think this is evidence you're onto something that's important. Credit availability clearly matters. And I think the challenge I have in reading your paper is I'm not so sure what parameter to believe, but that's it. It was a good paper. Thanks.